Allergies suck for nearly 1/3 of Americans. Talk about a total addressable market. Well, that's the problem Aakash Shah committed to solving after getting accepted into Y Combinator, the world's most prestigious startup accelerator. Akash tells me how easy it was to get accepted into YC, but how it was very different from his expectations. He mentions how they got access to the right people to scale, and how after YC, they prioritized a sustainable business model to reduce their need of outside funds because the market had dramatically shifted from when they got accepted to when they started growing the business. This is episode 51 of Fundraising Demystified, the show where I interview founders and investors that are actively raising or deploying capital in today's market. I'm your host, Jason Kirby, and I've built and sold multiple companies as a founder, operator, and investor across multiple industries. This show is meant to uncover what's actually happening in today's private capital markets and to help founders and investors make better capital strategy decisions. This show is published weekly, and to get notified of new episodes and access a few freebies like our guide on how to negotiate term sheets or a free list of hyper-relevant investors, be sure to subscribe at join.thunder.vc. Again, that's join.thunder.vc. Now, onto the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Fundraising Demystified. Today we have Aakash Shah with us, co-founder and CEO of Wyndly. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason. I really appreciate the opportunity.
No, I'm excited to have you on the show. You're solving a big problem that affects probably billions of people when it comes to allergies. So tell the audience a little bit about you and what you're building at Wyndly.
Absolutely. So I run Wyndly, and what we do at Wyndly is we're fixing allergies forever, right? So we're starting with what you breathe with. So if you go out in the spring and you're just like being bombarded by pollen or dust or whatever, and you're just like, this is horrible. Well, we can take care of you forever. We can make it so you never have to take an antihistamine or a drug like that ever again. And this is a very personal problem for me because I was a horrible allergy sufferer. Literally from the moment I moved away from my high school to go off to college and then off to my first job a few years after that, I just couldn't breathe. And I thought, that's just normal. And when I actually look, when you're a young 20-something-year-old boy, it's not really important to fix your health issues. I'm paying for it now that I'm a few years older, though.
Yeah.
What I really learned, though, is eventually I tried to find the medical professional who would be able to help me, which is an allergist here in the U.S. And it was a gauntlet and a Byzantine labyrinth just to get there. And then when I get there, they say, okay, I need you to come in for a shot in the arm for years, every single week. And who has I can't do a multi-year relationship with my physician. I hardly had a multi-year relationship with the woman who became my wife when I was starting. I found an alternative solution. I realized that this is actually completely kosher with all of the regulations. There's just broken incentives in the healthcare system that were kind of keeping the better treatment out of people's hands. And I've dedicated my life, along with my co-founder, to making sure that the best solution for allergies gets to the people, regardless of how our healthcare system is built.
Did you know that most founders waste days of their lives chasing the wrong investors? Well, as a founder, your time is your most valuable resource. Don't waste it on the investors that aren't going to write you a check. Here at Thunder, we built a free tool that identifies exactly which VCs are worth your time to pursue. We score your company against 3,500 VCs and family offices that have been vetted and are actively writing checks into companies like yours. Get your AI recommended list of investors that will look like this absolutely free by creating a free profile at Thunder.vc. You can upgrade to premium to download this list, export it to any tool you wish, and get their contact information and access the data on their portfolio companies to map out a path to warm intros and build your founder network. Sign up for free at Thunder.vc. Now let's get back to the show.
Well, it's a close to home problem for me because my whole life growing up in Southern California, didn't have any allergies. Totally fine. It's basically desert down there anyways. And when I moved to New York, I was like, whoa, what is this? I can't breathe. I wake up, because I like sleeping with the window open, and then I'd wake up like completely congested and miserable. Started doing the sprays and Claritin, all that kind of stuff. And it was pretty tough. My body managed a little bit better over the years, but now that I just moved to London and I'm here in London, it's like got a little bit of it, but not too bad. But it runs pretty rampant in my family. My mother's, completely bombarded with allergies, and so I'm very keen to kind of learn more. And definitely my mom might be a customer after this, because she's the one doing the shots, every year, multiple times a year, kind of stuff. So it's definitely a very big problem and a very painful problem. So usually when that's the situation, usually VCs or investors get excited, hence why you're on the show. But before we dive into your fundraising experience, you have more of a product and or software product and engineering background. How did you get from that to starting a personalized healthcare business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the very clear answer is like I had the problem myself, and then I found a way to fix the problem myself. And then I was just like, well, how do we do this for more people? And when I say more people, the first person I tried to get on this treatment after myself was my wife, and then my sister-in-law, right? And it was only after I'd proven the product of efficacy with 3 people that I actually started looking for a market. My personal background, it's in software and in growth product. So what that really means is like, how can you use engineering skills and talent to grow a business, right? And so that was a nice intersection of being an engineer and being a marketer. After that, it was finding something that I felt was worth trying to fix on a grand scale. And when 1 in 3 people have allergies that are so bad that they're taking pills multiple times a year, and it's just like they just can't breathe day in and day out, and it's a huge loss of quality of life, that does feel like a big enough problem to sink my teeth into. It's funny, in our business, you would think that the person with the computer science background or the software engineering background would be the technical founder. My co-founder is a doctor, so technically he's the one that's really handling the technical stuff. Nowadays it's a lot easier in 2024 than it was 15, 20 years ago to stand up a website, and sell something to an end user. Medicine hasn't gotten any easier though.
No,
so, I think when someone wants to become a founder, it's about finding the right problem. And a lot of times you want that problem to be ginormous because the risk you're taking is really big. And then you need to have a fit with the founder's skill set, right? And so my experience at other consumer companies made it a good fit to solve a consumer problem. Now, that's not saying that I couldn't have gone and started selling to the government, but it's just it would be a little harder. And it's like, lean into your strengths, I like to say.
No, that's fair. And you've had a previous founder experience, correct?
Yeah, during college, I did what every student does, and I was like, I hate studying, so I should create something that makes studying easier instead of just studying. That's also where I learned my very, very first lesson, which is your customers and prospects are going to lie to you. For example, every student is like, I want to study more. In fact, when I really dug into what students want to do, it was like, I just want better grades. Learning was secondary towards better grades. And then I did the third thing, which is like, I was like, what if I just got you test banks and made it easy for you to review test banks? And that actually did work as a product because that was a whole life cycle. If I had a hypothesis, I proved the hypothesis wrong. I adjusted my understanding of the market, and then I found a better solution for the market. But unfortunately, when I graduated, my ability to get my hands on test banks just plummeted, as you can expect. And so I wrapped up that project. But we did raise a very small amount.
Okay, so you kind of got your appetite wet. You know, you got your little bit of experience there, and then ultimately leading to Wyndly where you're at now. And so let's talk about fundraising. So you raised obviously maybe a little bit of maybe friends and family back in Fluency, but with Wyndly, it sounds like you raised a couple million. Just talk about kind of the strategy to raise, the timeline, and what that experience was like.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the way we approached Wyndly initially was very much, we knew there was like a product which worked, right? Because I ended up just starting a company with the doctor who had been able to help me. And specifically what we do at Wyndly is we're like an allergy practice to fix your allergies forever, only we do it online instead of in person. And we make it more simple and more easy than any other doctor's experience you've ever been through, right? So we have an at-home allergy test. We'll figure out what you're allergic to, and then we're going to ship you all of your medicine. And then whenever you want to talk to a doctor, you can text, email, or call us, and we're super accessible. You don't even get kind of like a phone tree, which we're all used to hearing whenever we call support, right? And, we're going to respond right to you. So it's a highly accessible doctor with a very narrow focus on what we treat, which is allergies that you breathe in. So the doctor, which has helped me, he already knew kind of how to handle kind of doing this sort of treatment in a non-traditional way because I was in New York and he was in Denver, Colorado. So, once he fixed my problem, once he fixed my wife's problem, I was like, well, how do we prove out that more people want this? And so we started just testing. Yes, we know that there's a lot of people with allergies, but are there people with allergies who want to fix them online? Once we got about 20 people signed up, that's when we really knew, okay, there seems to be some interest here. How do we fund it so that we can kind of grow it? Initially, we were just going to self-fund it, and we were just going to recycle our profits from our full-time day jobs into this to see what we could do. But as a whim, we applied to Y Combinator. Now, I'll be completely honest. The reason I applied to Y Combinator is because it's a very good litmus test for how serious your co-founder is, right? A lot of times you start companies and you're getting lucky, and it can be very difficult to start. Like, the number one reason companies die is because co-founders break up and both people kind of lose the passion and ability to keep fighting through. Right. Nothing's going to kill a company more than that.
And money.
So
money's also one of the other.
Right. But the reason you run out of money is because you stop trying. Right. Sure. Every company that I've seen let me rephrase, especially at the early stage. Obviously, once you're a massive company and you're trying to become a going interest, it's different. But if you've raised $500,000 between two people, the number one reason you're going to die is because someone loses belief on we together as a team deserve to be billionaires, straight up. Right. And so that's the relationship, right? That's my co-founder is my cousin, but I probably talk to him more than I talk to my wife, which, that's a topic for a different podcast.
Very, very familiar.
Anyway, I used the Y Combinator application. We'd gotten some traction. I was trying to see how serious are both of us, both him and I, right? And what we realized is look, we're serious about this. We both believed in this. Just going through the application helped us realize that we were excited about the opportunity. And then we were very lucky to be invited for an interview. And then we studied very hard and we actually got into Y Combinator. So our very first round of fundraising was us thinking that we were going to kind of be self-funded through our day jobs as a side business to getting into Y Combinator. And so you see these sort of accelerator programs as a relatively simple application, and they're going to drop a stack of capital on you. I think Y Combinator gives $500,000 now. So that's enough money to prove out almost every business idea.
Yeah. And that's something I want to talk about, kind of the YC experience and your decision to do it. I think that's a pretty unique and valid reason to do it, and to kind of get that early validation. And the fact that you got that experience is, super valuable. And it also, I imagine, opens doors. So kind of now that you've kind of been through it and you raised a little bit of money through it, kind of what was the experience, since then, and how has that kind of impacted you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think Y Combinator was incredible, right? We did basically a few hours worth of work, and they gave us our pre-seed round. It's the easiest money we've ever gotten. I feel very grateful for them taking a chance on us. Then going through Y Combinator.
Did one of the decision makers have a stuffy nose during the presentation? Were they feeling the pain
I think one thing that's really interesting is all of our initial angels and even a lot of our institutional dollars, the partners are the investor, like the person whose money is being invested, they started out as patients and customers. Yeah. And then once we fix them, they're like, oh, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Like this should exist in the world. It's going to exist. And these people are hungry enough to make it happen. So yeah, many of our investors did have stuffy noses.
So you raised.
You say it as a joke, but it's totally true. Yeah, it's exactly as they have, man. It's very strategic. No, so I would say Y Combinator. I think from the outside, before going into YC, I thought, oh, this is going to be like a college program. It's going to be a step-by-step course. And at the end of it, I get to present, right? Because that's kind of what my experience had been in college. And even after college, basically any programs that I'd done. That's not what Y Combinator is. Y Combinator basically, for us, on the very first day, they sat us down and they're like, look, we're going to give you money. We're going to give you connections. We're going to give you all of our written down learnings. And we're going to give you access to like hundreds, if not thousands of brilliant people who will actually sit down and take your call for the next few weeks. It's up to you to take advantage of that. And, you saw very quickly people who weren't able to manage without the structure. Right. And then you also saw, because the only limiting factor is how much energy and how much momentum are you putting in, that you could, like individuals can kind of skyrocket very quickly. For us personally, Y Combinator allowed us to go from a single state practice to a 50 state practice in approximately 3 weeks, because they just opened the doors and got us in, doctors who had the right licenses would take emails from us once they saw that we were Y Combinator backed and we were serious, versus like beforehand, they just wouldn't open. And it's not their fault. They're protecting their time. It's, they fund, like YC just fundamentally changed who we are, and they were able to broker those introductions. So I would say, yeah, Y Combinator fundamentally changed the trajectory of this business and thus my life. And then when I say they give you that stage, it's totally true. Like you're not going to get as much. Well, I think when it comes to fundraising, you're effectively running an auction process, right? Because usually when you're fundraising, there's a certain amount of the company you want to sell. You want to sell it in a certain amount of time, and you want to get the best value, maybe not the best valuation, but the best terms for it. And the way to build leverage is by running a parallel process as much as possible. And Demo Day acts as a way to say, it acts as like a decision point for people who you're talking to before Demo Day, and say, hey, look, you want to get in before Demo Day, because once Demo Day happens, just market dynamics are going to change how much we're worth. And then Demo Day just puts you in front of like 300, 400 people. And if you're able to make a good pitch, you will get a lot of introductions and you'll be able to take a lot of calls. When we went out to raise again, just emulating the kind of pressure which is created by Demo Day is effectively impossible. I'm just always chasing that, as far as like next time you fundraise, what are you going to try and do? Yeah. I want to create a market for the company that I'm trying to sell. That's basically it.
No, there's some good insights. I feel like a lot of founders aspire to be NYC, or think of it as an option for them, and it's good to kind of get that inside scoop and perspective. And yeah, it is kind of you get that one shot to kind of put out your best presentation. You got the most attention, the most eyes on you, and to try to capitalize on them as best you can. So you graduate, you kind of move beyond YC. What was it like And after where you at with the business, and you went on to raise some more capital, I think in 2023. So, a year or 2 years later after YC, how was that different? And, just kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, so we went through Y Combinator in 2021. We're a healthcare company during the greatest healthcare crisis that hopefully all of us will ever live through. Knock on wood. And there was a lot of interest, right? Like, oh, you're a healthcare, you're doing something very specific, you're in respiratory, and there's a respiratory virus going around. Maybe you're going to be able to expand into something that every single person in the world will need. And you can sell a vision like that. Interest rates were low. A lot of money was going into venture because their LPs had money to throw around, because the LPs weren't investing in consumer goods. There was a lot of macro effects that were changing the fundraising environment. Then 2023 comes around, and 2023 is very different. Interest rates are suddenly high again. I don't want to say it's a correction, but the world has opened up. So money is going different places. That's actually what happened. And, we leverage AI because if you're not using AI nowadays, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. But we're not an AI company. At the end of the day, we're a healthcare company that's going to make people feel better and give them the ability to breathe better and fix a fundamental problem they have, right? We're not a chat GPT. And the interest just isn't there as much, right? VCs are looking for something different, and we're just out of cycle. Now, it's very natural and this is very normal, but what this also means is maybe it's just harder to raise if you're in healthcare versus if you're in an AI business over the next 5-10 years. We all forget the heady days of 2019 when crypto and people actually talked about crypto, right? It's probably a lot easier to raise for a crypto company in 2019 than it is today, So I would say the biggest difference is just understanding that while everyone probably was taking my calls in 2021 and 2023, it was more industry focused and people that actually had an interest in healthcare. But that also kind of helped me, I was more mature, and I also knew that okay, this is actually good because I think, fundraising is about finding, you only need one yes, right? What's hard is to get to that one yes, you're going to go through 300 no's. But personally, I think you want to get to those no's faster so that you're not kind of leaving it up in the air. So I would say one of the early mistakes I made is I was talking to B2B infrastructure SaaS companies, and that was just a waste of everyone's time because they don't want to invest in consumer healthcare, and I didn't know they didn't want to waste time in consumer healthcare, what they would consider wasting time, and I would be sad when it didn't work out. When it's not personal, it's just what are they supposed to do? What are they allowed to do? So I would say that's kind of the difference between 2021 and 2023, and also what are just some learnings I have from 2021 and 2023.
So with the 2023 raise, maybe the numbers were not exactly what you said, but just out of curiosity, how did you set up so many meetings? How did you get people to open up their door and have a chat with you? Did you have 300 meetings? Did you send 300 emails? Kind of what was that experience like to where you ultimately got the check that you were looking for?
Yeah. So, we announced our raise, I think early 2023. And when I say announced it, that's when it went public with it. So the actual process had been happening in late 2022. And that was simply a function of, I believe that people want to hear about you. Right. So every time I talk to someone, I'm very open with my investor updates. I'm hey, you're probably going to get them, Jason. The next one I send out is going to have Jason. It's going to have your email. It'll come right to you. And, it'll be oh, I talked to this guy. Hopefully you have a positive, takeaway from me. And now you're okay, this is what he's up to. And when the time comes and I announce hey, we're actively fundraising, we have this term sheet and we want to close out $3-5 million, whatever, you'll be able to say, you know what, Aakash is pretty cool. I've been following him along for a reason. This might be interesting to like this family office, right? So that's kind of how it works out. That's how I leveraged the big interest from demo day again 2 years later, right? Because fundamentally, you have to like, it doesn't feel like it when you start. It feels like a short game when you start. It feels like, every 2 years you're starting from scratch. But what's actually happening, it's a compounding game. The relationships I made in 2021, they are still part of my life. They're still paying off figuratively. And you never know when someone might be able to help you, especially in something as broad as allergies and healthcare, because everyone knows someone with bad allergies, and we've all had to deal with the healthcare system. I actually think, sometimes people will say, well, yeah, but how does that work if you're doing like a niche AI thing? And I was just like, I just think like, you never know how it's going to work out, because like the people who are just sitting on their hands and, aren't going to be helpful, it doesn't cost anything to stay in touch with them. And the people who are going to be helpful will become helpful to you because you're just, keeping them interested and you're telling a good story. And everyone wants to learn from the founder who's in the trenches, because founders who are in the trenches always have interesting things to say.
That's something I always kind of advise founders to speak to, is just like, it's one thing to go out and say, I'm building X, give me money. But I think what most investors like is they like to be educated on industries and sectors and markets and opportunities and strategies, and be told stories that they probably haven't heard before, or because you're a founder that's in the thick of it every day, you just have a different perspective to share. And spending some time on that in those conversations and kind of finding out where investors lean as far as wanting to kind of unpack something a little bit more, make sure to try to feed that and kind of give those perspectives and opinions, because it just creates more of a relationship and a dialogue, as opposed to shut up and give me your money, which usually doesn't end well. Everyone,
it's a little trickier. Who would have thought?
Yeah, you think like, you have money, I want money. Why don't you give me money? I don't see what's so complicated. I get have calls all the time with founders, and they're just like, okay, so when do we get the money? And I'm just like, I think you're already on the wrong foot, and you probably won't get it. And it's a much harder process when you have that conversation. So I think that's some good insight in kind of how you kind of set it up and ran your process and whatnot. And just kind of now going through two different, when it's hot and when it's not so hot. What were some of the, I would say, more frustrating experiences that, looking back, you would have done differently?
Yeah. I mean, I think I just it's hard when you're a founder to like put yourself out there and like bare your heart, and then someone has to say no. Right. And I think even from the VC side, it's like, they're not saying no because they don't believe in you, or they don't think that you're not going to maybe they don't think you're going to make it. But effectively, like, hearing 300 no's doesn't feel good, even if you're inured to it. Right. Like, it just inherently doesn't feel good. And I think personally, I kind of let that affect my momentum. And so that extends the time of the fundraise, which extends how long I am away I am from the company. So the thing that the like most frustrating thing is like, the lesson I have is like, kind of try and keep it tight and focused and say like, hey, I'm going to be away from the company for 3 months. We're going to see what we can do. And then we'll reconvene in 3 months and see like, okay, do we want to commit another 3 months to it? Or are we just going to shut it down and like find a different way to grow this company? Because like venture capital at the end of the day is just like an option, or it should just be an option. For some companies, it's like a lifeline. So, it can be really difficult to like personally, it feels bad to fundraise because you hear no's. That is what I hear from the vast majority of founders. Now, there are some like incredible founders who love fundraising, who love kind of telling their story and are just good at it. But for me personally, it just feels like, okay, hey, I'm talking to you. I told you everything. I think it's an awesome case. And then like you get an email the next day being like, yeah, we're going to pass for X, Y, and Z reason. And you're like, you don't even know what we're going to be able to do. And I think that just feels hard. And then you have to take that back to your team, and your team's like, well, since you've been gone, we're down, 10% of the team. So we're not, we're growing 10% less, for example, and then you're like, oh no, this is going to affect our story. So it feels like a death loop, and you have to keep yourself out of that kind of mental state and just realize no, this is just a bet you're taking. And regardless of the outcome, you entered into it on good faith.
I think that is actually incredible advice for founders to be able to take in and acknowledge in their process. But I want to kind of take a step back and talk about the venture capital is or should only be considered an option, not a lifeline. That kind of prompts the question of just, how do you think about your company's capital strategy? And for the audience, I'll just elaborate on what capital strategy means, because that's what we do here at Thunder all day, every day, is helping companies navigate it. So capital strategy is basically how do you prioritize your resources, in most cases, resources, capital, and what's kind of the plan to acquire the capital resources that you need and or plan for a capital event like an acquisition. So just to kind of give some context to the audience there. So Akash, kind of what was your thought process and how do you think about capital strategy for your business?
Yeah, I mean, coming out of Y Combinator, the way you acquired capital was you fundraised. And the reason for that is really simple. You are a completely fresh company. You have no customers. You have no revenue. Why would people give you debt? So where are you going to get money from? You're going to sell a part of your company on the dream that, someone will want to buy it because it's going to be worth billions of dollars. If you've done the right thing and actually built a company in the intervening 2 or 3 years or however much time it's been, then you should have revenue. And once you have revenue, you can start looking at capital, ways to get capital that every other business does. That's not a startup. You can do debt financing, which is just getting a loan. Nowadays, there's also revenue-based financing and factoring, which is you should get paid. You're going to get paid this much over the next 12 months. So we'll give you the money up front. You can find capital from your existing customer base by raising your costs, raising your prices. You can find capital by offering a 12-month plan paid up front instead of paid monthly. So now suddenly your cash collection, you have the cash to do whatever you need to do. And as long as you cover your costs and know you're going to be around in 12 months, well, suddenly you're not as worried. So those are all. Then the way I discovered these things is I stopped talking to seed stage software founders. And I asked my whole network. I asked people I asked doctors who had private practices of 4 locations. And I say well, how did you get the capital to open up your 5th location or your 6th location? You talk to a restaurateur. Dude, restaurant margins are crazy. So how does a restaurateur open up 2, 3, 4 new locations? You talk to them, you figure out how they approach it. They tell you, hey, it's actually not about your P&L, it's about your balance sheet, because your balance sheet is actually your P&L only matters if you're trying to get sold or get invested in. Yeah. Your balance sheet is what's keeping you alive. And the most interesting thing is very recently, consumer packaged goods. So the sort of stuff that's sold online through Amazon or Instagram or Shopify, they used to have a very steady business model of you would run a Facebook ad or a TikTok ad, and it would be very well targeted. And they were very confident that it would result in a sale. Now, there have been a lot of changes recently around that sort of tracking, which is good for the consumer, but has thrown a huge wrench in these people's abilities to kind of target and predict how many sales are going to happen. And I talk to people who are doing, 10, 20 million per year in revenue. And they're like, yeah, and they have much bigger costs than most software companies because they have inventory, right? So they have to do upfront expenditures and they have to cross their fingers and pray. And also if their inventory sits in a warehouse. So if they incorrectly project, that costs them dollars every single day. because warehouses is, you have to pay for warehouse space. So all of this is like, I realized basically what I did, this is a long story, Jason, to say like, I found businesses which are harder to run than like my medical practice or than a SaaS company. And I asked them how they did it. And they were like, we're just very smart we track the money coming in differently than we track the money going out. And you should find a way to like front your revenue so that you collect so you get capital sooner. And so I'm going to be completely honest. The best way we increased our runway is we introduced an annual plan, and suddenly people are paying us for 12 months of service up front. And that was huge for us. That like fundamentally changed the trajectory of the company, because now we have cash that we can actually play with and operate with.
And that's called raising from your customers. And
that's exactly. And that's the best place to raise too.
Yeah. It's so many founders just don't even because they're just so addicted to venture capital and that narrative, and that once you're in the founder ecosystem and you've been exposed to venture capital, it becomes like this point of validation and credibility, and everyone wants it. But in reality,
it looks good. It's also, it feels like a silver bullet, It's like, I just need one person to say yes and drop like $5 to $10 million on me. And then all of my worries are gone.
Yeah.
Right. Or, you can like buckle down and do the hard, ugly work of like, making your company just better from like a P&L and balance sheet perspective. And suddenly you're actually now more attractive to going out and fundraise too. Right.
And have better options. You don't have to just pay for, get venture. You could sell to private equity, you could do debt, you can do all kinds of financing options. And
exactly.
One of the other things, I'm just so glad you mentioned the annual plans, because again, financing through your customers is very much a possibility, especially if you have larger ticket items and or subscriptions or things of that sort, to just pull that cash up front and then just manage it appropriately. You don't want to like blow it all, the first month, and then you got to go out and get more customers and pay for it up front. But it's definitely the point is that you have to think about capital strategy and what options are on the table specifically to you and your environment and your industry and your scope. And you've kind of dabbled in the kind of talking about SaaS, but you're kind of a personalized healthcare CPG type model, and it's not SaaS, but it's got recurring aspects.
Well, we're healthcare as a service, right? Yeah. Because you have to be on our treatment for a couple of months, up to 3 years, if you want the lifetime of relief. And so there is subscription revenue there, but we don't have software margins. And like in software, you can suddenly stop building, like you can stop spending on software basically. And like the software won't change for a few months and you'll still be able to collect that revenue. Whereas like for us, look, we have doctors who review patients' charts. Like that is an ongoing cost that absolutely needs to happen. The medicine we send out, that is a cost that absolutely has to be covered. So we're an in between, but like, eventually, like once you're big enough, like all of this is a function of being big enough to like take advantage of these strategies. If you have no customers, you can't like do release an annual plan and raise from your customers. If you have no costs, you can't open up a better credit card and get like 2-month terms and like write 60-day payout on the credit card. You can't negotiate with your vendor. If you're only spending like $300 a month with your vendors, they're not going to negotiate with you on payout. But when I'm spending, $80,000 a month with someone and I say, hey, I'm going to pay you on net 90 instead of net 14, it's a lot harder for them to say, no, thank you. Right. And all of this to get to that, I believe it's called negative cash flow cycle, or is it a positive cash flow cycle?
Conversion,
negative cash conversion. Yeah, man. Like that's the dream. Negative cash conversion, where money hits your bank account and stays with you before you longer, like than it costs you.
Before you have to pay out. So for those who don't know, cash conversion cycle, very important for any kind of like inventory related business. But for the sake that when you actually have to lay out cash for the and then when do you get paid back? So typical consumer business is like 30-day to 90-day or even worse, 90-day plus cash conversion cycles. You buy a bunch of inventory and you sit on it until you sell it out, and that might average out to like 90 days until you got to buy again, and so on. So that's manageable for some businesses. But if you have a negative cash conversion cycle, that means you've already been paid before you have to pay for that product for the goods, and that's how healthy businesses continue to grow and scale. And credit card float is one of the strategies to do that. Again, capital strategy.
I know, it's so good. And yes, I like this idea comes from like inventory, but you can apply it to like acquisition spend in general, right? Yeah. Like if I have a salesperson and we pay out our bonuses at the end of the quarter, right? And so if like the salesperson closes people throughout the quarter, I get all that capital up front. And now however much time is between when the revenue hit the bank account and I paid out this salesperson's bonus, that's a cash conversion cycle right there. That's like beneficial to us. And again, this is why this is on the flip side, right? If I pay out the bonus on the full annual contract value, but they're paying monthly, then I'm actually sending money out before I got the money in, which is not what you want to do. Sorry. I feel like I was well spoken at the beginning of this, and like now I'm getting giddy talking about cash conversion cycles, Jason.
It's actually something that a lot of founders don't even think about. They don't. It's just not a tool in their toolbox that they consider or have been educated on. But because you, as you mentioned earlier, you reached out to other founders and other entrepreneurs that are building businesses, and how do they do it? How do they manage it? And you're talking to people that have already been through it. It opens up doors. It opens up ideas, allows your brain to think, and you start kind of looking past what you thought was a brick wall, but it's really just a glass wall that you can just kind of break through and move through and kind of see what your options really are. So. That's why I love talking capital strategy. It's a lot of fun. It's just all these kind of creative, innovative ways. I see companies that, a VC would look at them and like, oh, they're going to be dead tomorrow. Looking at traditional metrics. But when you look at one, how committed founders are sometimes to deriving the desired outcome, they find a way. And in the last few years, a lot of founders that thought VC was their way and realized VC ain't their way, especially CPG. They had to play this game and had to kind of find alternative strategies because, that $5 million check that you think will solve all your problems is never going to come. And so you have to get creative or you give up. I think this has been a fun chat. So before we wrap up, any kind of parting advice to founders, or like a one-liner that you want to share for founders that might be considering options for themselves?
There's nothing more important than having a group of friends who are going through it with you. So find your people. It might feel awkward. It might take time, but the value in having people to learn with, but also shoulders to cry on and like someone to just call when, calls that you thought went really well actually didn't go well, calls that you want to have someone to celebrate with, but you also want to have someone to, commiserate with. And those human connections are what's going to give you the energy to take those 300 no's and just stay heads down and keep pushing through. I would say like, if you can avoid fundraising, you should do that too.
Every business is different, and it's contingent on what their desired outcomes are. Ultimately, some fundraising might be the only option to pursue their ultimate dream. But I think the surrounding yourself by other founders, and that's something that impacted my career early on, was coming out of college with all like-minded founders that were all that majority of that group, like 89% of all of us, there's about 20 of us, have all gone on to build $10 million companies, plus. And we were all in it in the early days, supporting each other, one after another, and just being that, as you say, shoulder to cry on, the person that can kind of, empathize with you and understand, versus your buddy that works at, Google, who, gets their lunch paid for and they're having a steak meeting there for lunch at their office, while you're eating ramen to, kind of save expenses. So, this has been a fun chat. Akash, where can people learn more about you and Wyndly?
Yeah, I mean, Wyndly, it's easy to find. It's wyndly.com, WYNDLY. We're all over YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. If you search anything about allergies, we're probably going to pop up. For me personally, look, I'm always happy to chat. Send me an email at akash@wyndly.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. Hopefully my SEO is good enough that you're going to be able to find me. But if not, just something for me to work on.
Awesome. Well, if people can't find you, they'll let you know. Well, I guess they can't let you know because they can't find you. But we'll make sure to make the links easy and accessible in the YouTube description down below. So, Akash, I really appreciate you sharing your insights, sharing your story, and thanks for joining us on the pod today.
And thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the show today. We hope you learned something valuable. And if you did, be sure to let us know in the comments or by hitting that like button. And if you're a founder looking to raise capital, then join us at Thunder.vc. We provide a free tool to help you identify which VC, family offices, or lenders are the best fit for you using our AI. It will save you a ton of time from chasing the wrong investors. And since launching our free tools, founders that have joined our network have gone on to raise over $1 billion in financing. Again, you can find these free tools at Thunder.vc. And as a reminder, we release new episodes every week. So stay informed by subscribing to our newsletter at join.thunder.vc. Again, that's join.thunder.vc. And if you or someone you know has recently raised a round and want to share your story, please email me at jason@thunder.vc. And that's our show. We hope you enjoyed it, and we see you next week.